Give yourself more options, Sylvia. Give yourself more options. Don't corner yourself into a place where your only option is to go through this piece of terrain at a time when conditions are deteriorating.
Years ago, when I was managing the ACMG Avalanche Research Program, I hired Sylvia to train the field staff in low-risk backcountry travel. She was amazing. For this podcast and video, I wanted to learn more from her. Sylvia Forest started climbing with her father, Don Forest, at a very young age, which ultimately led to pursuing her guiding certification. In 2001, she became the 5th female mountain guide in Canada. Sylvia has a B.Sc in physical geography from the University of Calgary. She worked for Parks Canada for 23 years, during which she primarily worked as a visitor safety specialist. She managed the mountain rescue program in Glacier National Park for 8 years before retiring in 2013. Sylvia is an instructor and examiner for the Canadian Avalanche Association Industry courses, as well as for the ACMG Training and Assessment program. She is currently the president of the Association of Canadian Mountain Guides, the second woman to fill this role in Canada. Sylvia lives in Golden, B.C. with her husband, 8 horses, and 2 dogs. She continues to actively guide primarily heli-skiing in winter and mountaineering in the summer. In the spring and fall, Sylvia is busy with horse trips. Sylvia, what advice do you have for your younger self, or are there habits that work for you?
So I've been thinking about what I would tell my younger self about what I've learned and what I might do differently now that I didn't do when I was younger. And I'd say there's actually quite a bit. When I was younger, I was quite bold. Really, I depended a lot on intuition, and my training did go into that. And now I really think about things a lot more. And I have a small anecdote. This happened a number of years ago. I was guiding a group of women in Glacier National Park. And this guiding week occurred about 3 days after a really, really significant personal loss that I had. And I don't think my mind was particularly in the game. And interestingly enough, the other woman that I was working with also had gone through a very significant personal loss that very same week of a different nature. And it didn't help that conditions were quite challenging. It was very warm. It was sort of early spring. The snowpack was deteriorating. And we also had quite a challenging group of women. They were very diverse. Long story short, this week ended up in the very first rescue that I ever had to call Parks Canada to come and help me with. And when I reflect on what occurred, this is what I came up with. I minimized the exponentially deteriorating snowpack and weather conditions. I told myself it wasn't that bad. I also minimized or perhaps maximized my belief that I could guide these women through this kind of terrain safely. And the third thing I think is I didn't leave myself any options. I left everything a little bit too late in the day. Things warmed up faster than I anticipated. And it ended up with someone tweaking their knee in about the worst possible spot that they could. And so I guess the lessons that I learned from that I would tell my younger self is, and I would say they're threefold. One is give yourself more options, Sylvia. Give yourself more options. Don't corner yourself into a place where your only option is to go through this piece of terrain at a time when conditions are deteriorating. That'd be number one. Number two, don't minimize what you think is going on. take a closer look, and I'd like to speak a little bit about language. So a number of years ago, Grant, Statham, and others came up with some really great language that we're starting to use in the industry more now, and I use that language a lot. And it's the two pieces of language that I use a lot to myself are likelihood and consequence. And I really think about, okay, what is the likelihood of something happening and what is the consequence? And if I think back about this particular anecdote, as conditions deteriorated, the likelihood was becoming actually quite high that something bad might happen. And of course, when I think about the consequence, well, the consequence was anything from what did happen, which was a tweaked knee, to an avalanche involvement in a really nasty piece of terrain. So I really have to thank Grant and others for providing this kind of language that we can now speak with. And the other big one was, don't dismiss what's going on in your own personal life, because the truth was that week I should never have been guiding. I'd had this personal loss. It was on my mind. I wasn't really focused on the guiding and on the people and on the changing conditions as well as I should have been. And luckily for me, it ended up in a minor event, although I think that the individual involved didn't think it was particularly minor. I think the injury to the knee was, of high consequence for her, absolutely. And so I'm really trying to carry these messages with me as I get older. Every time I go out now, I think about likelihood and consequence. Now, there's a whole bunch of other language out there, a whole bunch of other concepts, but for me, those are the ones that kind of bring it home. So I think that's kind of my message to myself is understand where your head is at and be honest with yourself about that. Number 2, just always have options. Number 3, think about, whatever works, but for me, it's likelihood and consequence as a way of framing my thought process. And I guess a fourth one, which I know I've been guilty of most of my life, and I really think about that, is not minimizing when an event does happen, not sort of blowing it off and saying, oh, that wasn't such a big deal, or it wasn't that serious, or minimizing the effects of that event. I really try to, in a very reflective, sober manner, think about, okay, how serious was that? Was it, it was a near miss. What was it that made it a near miss and not something more serious? And what could I have done to avoid the near miss in the first place?